Okay, so here we are, Sam.
Here we are. Yeah. It's been in the making for a few months now, right?
It has been. Yeah, we've been talking
Mm.
about this for a while, and yeah, I'm pleased. I'm excited. Yeah, and I just want to really use this as an episode to just explain a little bit about who we are and what we're doing, right?
Absolutely. So yeah, tell us about you, Deli. Who are you?
So I'm Adele, or Deli to my friends. I am a trauma therapist, and I originate from South Africa. I was born and bred in South Africa in Kimberley, which is known as it's like the biggest man-made hole in the world or something. So
All right.
then moved to Cape Town, went to London, lived in London for kind of 11 or 12 years with some stints living in Milan and Amsterdam, and then moved to Chiang Mai in Thailand, where I started the kind of retreat portion of my business.
Yeah.
Business grew and more kind of staff and therapists joined. And yeah, I met a Kiwi boy, and I moved to just south of Auckland, and I now live on a farm with my
Yeah.
Kiwi fellow Jeff, and I have two beagles, Mogwai
Oh,
and Moloko. Yeah,
oh,
that's me.
nice. And how long have you been in New Zealand?
Since kind of December 2019 is when I
All right.
first arrived. And how about you,
Yeah.
Sam? Who are you?
Well, so I'm Sam McSorley. I'm not from New Zealand either, but I live in Nelson, which is the top of the South Island, and I'm from Inverness, up in the north of Scotland, up in the Highlands. I moved here 25 years ago, October just passed, but prior to that, lived in Ireland. And yeah, and been moved around New Zealand a fair bit. Started off in Timaru, then moved up to Auckland, then down to Christchurch, then up to Marahound, the Able Tasman, and I think finally settled here in Nelson. And I have a little dog, Olive, who I adore. She's a little tripod dog, 12 and a half. And I have three children. And yeah, I'm just really, really happy to be here because yeah, as I said, like we've been talking about this for such a long time, and I don't think either of us realized what has to happen for us to finally land here today, and in our introduction podcast. So yeah, I'm really interested, Deli, on like how did you land at your career as a trauma therapist?
So I think it's my chosen career. I think,
Yeah.
I suppose my first career, I was actually a management consultant.
Mm.
So I studied Bachelor of Business Science, and I started out as a management consultant living in London, traveled a lot, managed a lot of change management programs, mergers and acquisition type programs,
Mm.
software implementation programs. So traveled the world, which was really exciting, but I was very perturbed by the people side of the way that these programs were being run. And I think my fascination and interest and compassion with how mass redundancies, re-engineering programs have been run was just shocking. It had no heart and soul in it, really. So
Mm.
I started studying psychology from that point on, and I went on and I did a postgrad in traumatic studies and a master's in psychology, and started actually running much more of the people side and the training side of the business, trying to have bring a little bit more heart into it. And
Oh,
in
nice.
2009, I decided to start my private practice and get more into working with people that were in particular recovering from divorce and
Mm.
and breakups and heartaches and pain, because I was
Mm.
noticing that was kind of co-occurring a lot with people that were on the programs, these mass corporate programs that I was running.
Mm.
And that's where Naked.Recovery kind of started. And
Right.
I think, since then I'm a bit of a nerd. I like academia. And
Yeah.
I'm kind
Yeah.
of, always studying and researching and doing courses and things like that. And obviously that's how we
Yeah.
met. And I'm now starting to pursue my doctorate and get deeper into the study of health psychology. So I think
Wonderful.
yeah, that's kind of a little bit about me. How about you? How did you kind of stumble into your career?
Yeah, well, I've always been interested in natural medicine, and I always kind of leaned towards making my own little perfumes out of rose petals and flowers that were growing in the garden. And I was always quite curious about what was happening with the body, and from a young age recognized really curious about like what how your skin grows and I had salty eyebrows, and then I moved to New Zealand and this opportunity came. I always wanted to be a naturopath. I learned about it probably in my early 20s. So when I was about 26, I studied my first undergraduate degree in naturopathy and herbal medicine in parallel with a degree in health science, complementary medicine. And that got me started. And then I went into clinical practice, worked with some doctors in Christchurch in an integrative practice, and then went off to do a postgrad. Because what I was noticing was that my, what I was recommending and prescribing to my clients, not everybody was making the change. And so that then got me interested in why is that? What is it that I'm doing there where these people aren't making changes? So I was curious from my own lens of what it was that I was doing. So then I did a postgrad in motivational interviewing for behavioural change through the University of Canterbury in Christchurch. And then that led me on to, well, I've come this far, I've got to finish my master's. And so then I did my master's in professional practice with a focus on PTSD for children who were from birth through to age 5 post Christchurch earthquakes, which I was present for. And that was fascinating.
Mm,
And that got me really interested in the mind body more so. And then, did a few courses here and there, always learning, like you hungry for knowledge and learning, and get a real satisfaction from that. And then yeah, that's how we met, I guess. That moves nicely into how we met was through Hakomi psychotherapy. And I
mm,
was in my own psychotherapy, and I had been kind of going, what is it I'm going to do? There's just something that isn't enough for me in my naturopathic practice. And then in my own psychotherapy, I was just like, oh, I want to do what you do.
yeah.
And so then I started exploring psychotherapy, knowing that that's what I was actually interested in
Mm,
versus counseling. And um yeah, find Hakomi psychotherapy, and because of its backbone in Buddhism, Taoism, NLP, bioenergetics. It had this real holistic view of the person and who they are, and it's that seemed to tick my values as a naturopath. I was just like, oh my gosh, I think this course has been made for me. Like, so I was trying to practice, the principles of Hakomi, but could never actually put or articulate words into it. And so Hakomi kind of ticked all those boxes, and of course that's how we met in
yeah.
your red dress and your black jandals. I remember that day when we were doing the circle of interviewing each other. Yeah, so that was
Yeah.
that was a lot of fun. And so here we are, almost 2 years on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And Hakomi's been a beautiful rabbit hole to kind of tumble
mhm,
down. I think,
yeah,
you know, I mean, by this time I'd come to start Hakomi 18 months ago, I'd already probably done about 12 or 15 different trauma therapy courses.
yeah.
It was actually in an interview with Basil van der Kolk, who's a leading kind of expert in the recovery of
Amazing
trauma.
man.
He was the one that actually put me onto it with this idea. It's like Hakomi is one of the leading kind of trauma therapies in the world. And I thought, it is? Interesting. What is this? And, because everybody kind of talks about EMDR and they talk about obviously internal family systems therapy, which we're both
Yeah,
really into as well. But
yeah,
Komi has a totally different slant on how to deal with parts and systems. So yeah, we're very lucky that here in New Zealand we happen to have one of the leading kind of teachers of Hakomi, Jules Morgaine.
yeah, yeah,
And between her and Sahari, it's just been a real beautiful journey to kind of deepen into the principles of mindfulness and holism and unity and organicity and nonviolence and practice this in the therapy. And what I don't know about you, Sam, but what I think is
mm,
so clever about it is the tracking of so many different things in a human being at the same time.
it's
You are
phenomenal.
tracking minusculely, because it's a sensory
Mm,
motor psychotherapy, you're tracking everything about the person. You're picking
mm,
up things that are just outside of their consciousness
mm, mm.
and contacting it and deepening into it. And
Yes.
that's how trauma lives in the body. It's,
Yeah.
with a lot of my first base training in trauma therapy was obviously in that kind of cognitive behavioral therapy type, enhanced
Mm,
reliving, prolonged exposure, though. But this is on the edge of consciousness. It's not cognitive. It's not narrative. People can't always want it. They don't always want to talk about it, and it's not always there, but it lives in them, and it's
yes.
alive today in a trigger. And Hakomi is beautiful at exploring triggers in the most gentle way.
It's so beautifully gentle, isn't it? And I think when you discuss, oh, I do Hakomi psychotherapy, therapy has this kind of social construct that it's narrative, and the therapist needs
about
to know
talking.
I know the story and about
Mm.
talking. And yeah, of course, those therapies are amazing in their own right. Like narrative therapy, like conversational model, for example, is fantastic for trauma and PTSD and borderline personality, for example, and CBT, and all those other therapies that we have. But what Hakomi psychotherapy brings is just this. What we're encouraging is this child state of consciousness where we organized ourselves from the very beginning, but bringing in that dual consciousness state of the adult so that you can have those child and adult people side by side. And then, of course, Hakomi means, who am I in the realms in which I stand? So
Mm.
it really is about self-study and how I organize myself in the world, and how I experience the world, or how I miss out on experiences of the world because of how I organize myself. So yeah, I'm so glad we met. I think it's serendipitous because
Yeah.
we've very similar we have a very similar lanes of the world, particularly how we organise ourselves as well. That makes me laugh quite a lot, actually. I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's like a soul sister.
Well, we both have a lot of really strong manager parts, which
Yeah,
which are very strong in leading some
yeah,
members of a group, but it's
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
very organized, and I enjoy that about you,
yeah,
and I
yeah,
think
yeah,
you
yeah,
about
yeah.
me. So it's a good
Absolutely.
thing.
So then we
Yeah,
sat talking one lunchtime, didn't we, on our course earlier in the year, and it just kind of organically unfolded, if you like, as
yeah,
things do at a Hakomi workshop. About, oh well, let's actually do a podcast. I think we've got like some really good skills between us where we could do this podcast and be really informative and have a melting pot of ideas and help people be self-responsible, like responsibility in their lives. And because our podcast really is around health, relationships, and trauma. And I mean, that's a whole triad there, but you
it
can't
is.
separate any of that from each
Can't.
other. It's where we are, a mind and body is one. Our I often say to my clients, you've got this physical body, and it's not just carrying your head around. Like, that's not the purpose of your body. It's like they're actually joined, they're
Yeah,
not separate entities. And so a podcast really is around educating and informing people and bringing some life hacks in to inform people about how they can take self-responsibility. And
agreed. Yeah, and I think one of the things we talked about is the fact that you know um when you're working one-to-one with people or in
mm,
small groups, you're a little bit limited in how many people you can reach. And I don't like the fact that a lot of therapy is in a black box. Like people, health interventions are in a black box, and there's this
mm,
esteemed expert that is
mm,
sharing their knowledge, and they just give you
mm,
the kind of end bit.
mm,
People want to be educated. They want to understand, well, how
mm,
does this all link together? And
mm.
people have a thirst for knowledge and a hunger for that.
Yeah.
And I think I get frustrated sometimes when I listen to certain podcasts or certain information that's out there. It's a misinformation.
Mm,
And I think it's important to bring research and science and evidence base into it, and to reveal some of how we as clinicians operate, and what is it that we do, and how do we generate ourselves to do what we do for clients, and what are the theories and the systems and strategies that we use to succeed, and how do we work, and
Yes.
not just for us personally, but so that people can have access to that technology themselves and implement it in their own lives, whether or not they ever go to therapy or explore
Yeah.
naturopathy as one of their
Yeah.
protocols in the future. So yeah.
Yeah. And that kind of brings it to, like, we both value that a one size fits all approach doesn't suit general moving towards health in an organic, time unfolding way. And, I always say to my clients, and I encourage my clients to really consider who are their mastermind group, like who's got their back in all areas of their systems. Because, I mean, every single system, if you look at the hierarchy of systems, from the nervous system to the immune system to the digestive system to the integumentary system, they're beautifully orchestrated. Like, it's just this innate intelligence that our body has is just phenomenal. And I just don't think one person can resolve or help that person move towards health just on I think you need a team around you. And this is really what this podcast is about as well, is like bringing in, like, interlacing our podcast with guests who come from their own strengths, come from their own stories and backgrounds. And, we want it to be a really organic, natural podcast where we are just having chats with our guests, but also you leave with some tips and some more information that before you landed with. So yeah, I mean, yeah, that's what we're about.
Yeah, and I think our personal values about taking responsibility and managing your
Yeah.
health, your relationships, empowering yourself. I mean, the ethos that we both share is that healing is a learning journey. And actually, so the
Yes.
more you empower yourself, the more you learn about an area
Yes.
that you're challenged in, you have facility and you have the ability
Yes.
to figure it out and to problem solve and be empowered. And
Mm.
the worst thing we can do as people is to abdicate onto a guru or an expert and not
Yeah.
understand what it is that
Mm-hmm.
person is
Yeah.
doing for me. If you just go to a GP and they just give you a whole bunch of meds, I mean, we've spoken endlessly about the kind of pandemic of polypharmacy and people just taking a medicine for every kind of
Mm.
ailment, and
Mm.
sometimes they don't all kind of work well with each other, and it causes a
Yeah.
lot of symptoms. And
Mm.
that's one example. It's the same if you abdicate to your therapist and don't really understand, well, what is it that we're doing here? What is the
Yes.
plan? What is the
Yes.
structure? What's
Yes.
the context on which we're working, and what am I learning here?
Absolutely. And that touches really nicely on that naturopathic lens as well, is that in our trainings, we are encouraged to prescribe. And so I was like, it was kind of incongruent with me. And so I think what you're talking about here is that giving people self agency, like having agency around my choices in how I move forward to better health in my relationships, with my trauma, with my lifestyle, my diet. What's my what's my genetic makeup? Can I be more bespoke around that? And giving the client agency around why they have chosen to move towards what they have, decided on.
Definitely. And, in the field of health psychology, which is so beautifully interlaced with
Mm.
naturopathy, is seeing a person, it is a system, it's a lake. How I'm
Yeah.
feeling right now is a lake, and there's all these rivers that flow into the lake, and we've got to go upstream and look at every single river,
Mm.
whether that
Mm.
be my age, my genetics,
Yeah.
my background, be what traumas have I experienced in life? What are my relationships like? Am
Mm-hmm.
I going through something? Am I having an
Mm.
endocrine change like
Mm.
menopause? Am I
Mm.
am I experiencing stress at work? And
Yeah.
are there certain boundaries that I'm not setting? So these things are actually completely flooding me.
Yeah.
It's a system. It isn't
Yeah.
one thing. And although, like in my company, we have a lot of programs, it's funny enough, the programs are just this beating drum, but we are very bespoke in how we work with people because every
Yeah.
single person is completely
Mm.
unique. But the beating drum is this place of okay, well, you can still learn things and empower yourself along the journey. There's things you need to learn no matter
Mm,
what you're doing, but
mm,
you are an individual, and how you experience the world is based on your personality traits, your character strategy,
yeah,
your genetics, your exposure to trauma and stress in your environment, and you
yeah,
understanding that system and
yeah,
working with yourself as a system, not abdicating to people but actually taking power, is really
yeah.
key.
Yeah. I like to I liken that to like the 5 pillars. So I like to look at the biochemistry, I like to look at nutrition, I like to look at the emotional component, I like to look at the genetics and epigenetics, and then I also like to look at the environment. Like, what
Mm,
environment are you surrounded by? And I don't mean like the outside environment, like what's your work environment?
yeah.
What's your home environment? What's your relationships like? So those are all the topics that we're going to cover. And I think our first episode is going to be around stress. And yeah, tell us
It's
more
going to
about
be,
that.
yeah, so we're going to be talking, about not all stress is bad. Not all stress is equal. Some stress is good, some stress
Mm,
is bad. And we're going to talk a little bit about, what's out there in the literature, on how to find the sweet spot with
yeah,
stress. We're going to
yeah.
look a little bit about recognizing stressors, which is a little bit what you were talking about, the environment, like all the rivers that feed into the
Yes.
lake, and all these different things and how they can impact us. And what do you do about a stressor, and how do you
Mm,
recognize,
mm,
which then comes to how do you triage it? So that's a whole
yeah.
episode in itself, is how do you
Yeah.
triage stress
Mm,
well? And perfectionism and stress, those of us that have that as a character strategy, and that can cause mayhem,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
not recognizing our standards and expectations and rigidities, and how they can actually create more stress for us,
Mm,
and our health, and how our health can impact stress for sure. So, and the HRV, of course, looking at your heart rate variability, which is there's some nice tools and things that people can use to
yeah.
track
Yeah.
their balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous
Mm,
system
mm.
fluctuations, and how that actually is a measure you can use to empower yourself to be less stressed.
Yeah. So there'd be quite a few like somatics in here, isn't there? Because we can't know what we know now from Hakomi, and what we, all the bits that we kind of, the minutia that referred to, of what we see in a person as well, and what we help people notice about themselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, so look out, look forward to sharing our naked insights with you, and with our guests, and with our listeners.
Yeah. And if you have any ideas, for anything that you would like us to talk about based on our experience, we'd be delighted to kind of go deeper into that topic. But yeah, until we share our insights in the next episode, thank you for
Yeah,
joining us.
take care. Bye.
The information shared on the Naked Insights podcast is for educational and information purposes only, and is not intended as a substitute for professional therapy or counseling. While we aim to provide helpful and accurate insights, individual experiences may vary. If you're experiencing trauma, mental health issues, or distress, please seek guidance from a qualified professional. The views expressed by us as the hosts are our own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions or positions of any affiliated organizations.